Welcome to Splunk Talk, the only podcast that's all Splunk and no junk. I'm your host, Birch, and
I'm Hal. Hi.
and welcome to today's episode. This is season 2, episode 44. And today we're going to be joined by Luis Vasquez Gonzalez to talk about federated search
You could do it.
to Amazon S3.
You could do it. Yeah.
Is that
right?
right?
I think so. I hope so, because that's what he's working on. We'll find out.
Or baking tips. It could be either.
One of the two.
We'll see where it goes.
Yes. We'll see where it goes. Happy Friday, Birch.
Happy Friday. This is being recorded at the cusp of the Jewish New Year, so Lashana Tova, to those celebrating. And when this episode is released, it will probably be far past.
Well into the winter, perhaps
next
Hanukkah.
Year's New Year. Yeah. Or the Gregorian New Year will be where we're at.
It is on the cusp of fall here in Georgia. I don't know about where you're at.
Oh, we're in Fell.
Okay, you've already fallen.
Well, it's actually been really beautiful out, but today woke up to like 50 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And the body was not ready for that.
Yeah. We're not there yet. I'm in shorts, and I will probably be in shorts for another little while, but not a long while. And I saw some leaves. They were starting to fall.
I am a fan of summer, perhaps because my birth month is in the summer. Mm-hmm, I've always thought that's why I like it the best.
Yeah, but you don't live in the South. So
I don't live in the South.
Yeah. Have you been here during the summer in the South?
It's basically like the summer in the North the winter in the South is like the summer in the North.
Yeah.
I have been in South Carolina and Florida in July turning into August.
It's great for a little while if you've got water. If you have water nearby, it's fun.
I do enjoy exercising in that because you're already sweating anyway, standing still. So why not move around?
Yeah, but air conditioning. Am I right?
Am I right? Well, this summer, we saw significant heat waves hitting many of our dear friends and families. So a lot of people challenged, but I think that's past now. So
to me, that was just summer.
That was just summer. Well, I'm glad we have successfully kicked off this episode by doing the very invigorating discussion of how's the weather.
But how are things? I am. It's like planning season at Splunk, and just like new things are starting to. Well, we don't know what they're starting to do yet, but it gets interesting around this time of the year. And then we're kind of like gearing up to, okay, it will be a new year and we'll make new things and take things in different directions. So I don't know how it's going to plan out. And even if I did, I couldn't say it. That would be inappropriate. But
that would be inappropriate.
It is an exciting time, though. You know what I mean? So it's just like, okay, things are happening.
Would you say it's the most wonderful time of the year?
No, that used to be October, but now that is July, which is to say conf.
Which connects back to the episodes that came out just before this, were our recordings from conf, which was great. Always great to see you in person, to hug you, to be with you, to hold you, to love you, to cherish you.
Yep.
And
we'll just dial it back.
Okay. Sorry.
Family.
Thank you
show.
for letting me know.
It's a family show. We want to
what is acceptable.
Yeah.
Family friendly.
We don't want to get flagged.
Yes. But yeah, it was great. It was great being in person. It was great recording in person. It was great having Robin on. Had a great experience.
Which is not a Jewish holiday. That's Robin Berry.
Ramadan?
Yeah, Ramadan.
Not to be confused with Ramadan.
Which is a Muslim holiday. Yes.
I admire that when I have been editing and reviewing the episodes from Conf, the first one starts, and I feel like how they show the president and how the president ages during their term, and like their hair gets all like gray and their stress takes on them. You could see that on me in the different recordings we did. So
Really?
if you look at the first one, I'm which is funny because I did a Spartan race the day before we
Mm.
recorded that, or like 2 days before we recorded
In
that.
Vegas?
No,
Okay,
in
okay.
Pennsylvania. But
Hmm.
I like when we recorded that first episode, I couldn't barely move.
Oh
I
man.
was so beat up. And but like I'm like clean shaven, my voice
Hmm.
sounds okay. And then like 2 days later, I'm watching, the third one we did,
Hmm.
and I'm like all like worn out, stubble, like tired looking, and my voice sounds like this.
That's yeah. I don't no, I just wake up and I don't shave that much. Yeah,
You don't?
so to me, clean shaven is not really a thing.
Yeah.
Once a week ish, just
Yeah.
trimming, just kind of trimming and polishing and waxing, and I don't know, I should
And
do that.
waning.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm thinking our guest is going to be here in a minute.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to talk to Luis. Anything splunky that you're up to?
Anything spunky that I'm up to? I'm doing a lot of work with our observability solutions.
Okay,
And so
awesome.
that's been really fun to learn
Hmm.
about those.
Hmm.
Um, I forget if we ever addressed this, but I switched into a role. I was working with developer success,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I've since switched into a role working with customers again,
Yep, yep. Which you
directly.
did previously, a couple years prior or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of my Splunk origin story, orange
Hmm.
story. Started in this capacity and then returning this to this capacity, and is really fun. And
Awesome.
it's something that I've always had floating in the back of my head, is returning back to this role. It's a
Hmm.
great way to stay like aware and informed on like what's important to
Yeah,
people
yeah.
using the
Like,
products.
why are we actually doing this thing?
Why does any of this exist?
Yeah.
And helping them be successful, and that's really, really rewarding and
Hmm.
validating. So that's been fun. And yeah, I've been exploring like our real-time monitoring and applications performance monitoring and our metric solutions. And I'm looking forward to playing with them more and more, and
Awesome.
looking around with them in my lab.
Oh, that's
How
neat.
about you?
I think all about GDI lately.
Oh
So
yeah.
getting data in and helping the team with Edge processor, for example, and
Ooh.
SPL2 and data
S
processor.
Edge
So
processor uses SPL2, right?
it does. Hmm.
Oh,
Right
okay.
now, it is the only product that is using it. I might be slightly inaccurate on that. There might be another one that's in preview, or early stage, or early launch over in the security side. I think they're also brewing up some things, but correct. SPL2 is the basis for how you write pipelines in Edge processor.
Nice. Um, yeah, I think it's okay to say it's available, right? Edge processor is available today.
Mhm. Yeah, it actually shipped February 13th,
Oh,
but it was kind
I
of
hope that
like
wasn't a
a
Friday.
slow, quiet launch kind of thing. .conf was really where it came out.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we can talk freely about what's up there.
Nice. And yeah, so I mean, if that's the only, GA, generally available thing with SPL2, I think that's a reasonable statement that,
Well, there's
maybe
other
there's
stuff
stuff
that
in
is
preview.
known in public that I can talk about there.
Ooh.
There is so SPL2 will come to other things. We don't know what when exactly. However, there is a preview program underway right now with it in enterprise. So, but it's
Oh,
only for developers. So they want to get the developer experience right first. So it's probably going to be like an extended preview, and we definitely the PMs are kind of like collecting information about that. But it's really interesting. I
very
heard a
cool.
ding. I think we've got someone else in the room.
We do. Hi, Luis Vasquez Gonzalez. Did I say your name correctly?
You did. Hi, everyone.
Hi. We were just talking about you. Your ears must have been burning.
Okay.
We also do that by design. We start recording before you join, for people who are new to the podcast. And yeah, we're excited to talk with you. We determined we're either going to talk with you about federated search to Amazon S3 or baking tips,
Yeah,
or
we're
both.
not sure where this is going to go, but
Yeah.
we want people to learn a little bit about you, Luis. So,
We're going to do with you like we do with everyone. And we want
yeah.
to hear your orange story.
Your orange story. So
My orange story.
your
Yes.
orange story or your origin story, whatever you can,
Yeah.
but kind of
Take us way
what kind
back.
of
How
brought
did you end
you?
up here?
Yeah.
How did I end up here? Well, this morning I woke up in the room next door, and kind of like just walked over for a little.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Short term. Yeah, we've got a short term
Okay.
origin story. All right.
Yeah.
Short term.
Okay.
Can you
Well,
go back just a little further?
no, I'd like
Yeah,
to
further
believe he
than
didn't exist prior to that room.
yeah, further than real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my name is Luis, as you said, and correctly pronounced. While I cannot offer baking tips, I do have some background on data and other types of data products and solutions. I came from Mexico City. I was born and raised there. I was part of a family of 7 people. I am part of a family of 7 people.
But I've
You left
murdered
that
them
family
all.
a long time ago.
I am the only one.
Right.
Now,
And,
did
and
you
yeah,
did everyone come to the US, or is it you only, or how long were you in Mexico?
well, I was in Mexico for 23 years of my life, and then I happened to almost randomly choose computer science because all my friends were studying computer science, and almost randomly joined a kind of like a Microsoft recruiting event, and somehow ended up in Seattle. So that's how I ended up here. All my family's in Mexico still.
You
Okay.
make yourself sound like Forrest Gump. Like I just happened to be there. They were doing recruiting. I enlisted, and then I ran across the country.
Right. Yeah, my last name happens to be Forrest in English
Oh,
too.
okay.
Like, Bosques means forest.
It
Yeah.
Oh, I
translates.
didn't know that.
Yeah, it's Forrest Gonzalez.
with a Z, forests. Yeah.
Yes, Forrest Z. Yeah. So you almost
I have hold
accidentally.
on. I have a question about
Please.
Mexico City. Don't know much about it, but I know that it's very large. What is the metro in the United States that you would compare it most to if you had to?
Mm,
Oh, I think it really compares with New York City because in many ways, right? I think in Mexico City, a lot of people live outside of Mexico City but commute to Mexico City.
yeah.
So it's like a flooding of people that come in every day. 7 till 10 a.m. It's impossible to move around in the city. So maybe New York is a good comparison.
Okay, all right, good to know. Good to know. So
That's the correct
you're
answer.
in Seattle. Good job. Good job.
Good job.
So
You
you're
passed.
you're in Seattle. You're working for Microsoft. What did you work on there?
So I worked on SQL Server, one of the most mature database spaces. Kind of intimidating for someone coming out of college to be like, hey, like, what are indexes? What is a clustered index, and why am I supposed to make a decision on it as a PM?
Mhm.
But yeah, I spent about 5 to 6 years in Microsoft working on like different types of SQL Server. Everything
I'm
is
gonna
SQL
guess
Server in the
that
background.
after the internship they hired you. Otherwise, 5 to 6 years is a very long internship. Or was it a recruiting event?
It was, so I did intern. I actually skipped through that. I did intern for 3 summers in a row. And yeah, I enjoyed the intern life, which is a sweet life, definitely. And yeah, and that's when I worked in SQL. I actually worked in SQL throughout all my internships, and then eventually I joined full time for that.
Nice.
So
And then
you were there for 5 or 6 years, you said, doing that?
Yep, doing all database stuff, database in the cloud, databases not in the cloud, databases in Linux, in Windows, etc.
Awesome. So you learned a lot about kind of like data theory and platforms and the kind of the constraints on what the platform that the database runs on and how that affects the features. Any just like interesting challenges that you hit there that come to mind?
Yeah, there was an interesting thing going on at Microsoft when I joined full time. There was like this whole, like Microsoft had become aware of this whole thing called open source spaces. They're like, what? People don't pay for software? How is that possible? It had grown big enough that it attracted the attention of multiple Microsoft executives. And so many teams were tasked with the idea of, hey, how can we integrate into this ever-growing kind of like platform? So there was an idea of introducing SQL Server to Linux. And if you know anything about SQL Server, is that it's been primarily
Windows.
100% Windows, right? And
that was
so
a big deal.
It was huge, but like huge with certain audiences, right? You have to be a database nerd or an operating systems nerd to understand the different kind of implications there. But also let me know if you can hear me correctly.
You're great. I think it's just me. So for the folks listening, I type and then that disrupts everything that happens.
Yeah,
So.
just say it. Just say it. Hal was trying to tell us that he's got some audio drops going on, and he was being very kind.
I was
How
trying.
dare you,
I was
Hal.
trying. I failed
Yeah.
entirely at that.
But
Please
it's like when
continue.
you do a presentation, right? You can either read or you can listen, but you can't do both.
I
So
can
we
do
all
both.
Right.
Yeah.
Y'all can't do both.
We're single-threaded as humans,
Yeah.
right? Well, I
So-
am single-threaded.
Did you work on
We were talking about the open source,
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah, so I worked on SQL Linux, and I think the interesting thing about it is that I joined in this team. There were multiple principal level, engineers, like many architects, but the only person who could use a Linux shell was me, because I saw that in
Oh.
college, and it had been a while since they had been in university studies. So we were all learning at the same time, and I was like, oh, you use this command, you use this thing, etc., for the Linux environment.
Wow.
So it was an interesting space for sure.
Awesome.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
did you join for that?
Say
Sorry,
that
come
again,
again?
Hal. You're choppy.
Then it is my side, and we understand that.
Yeah.
Did you join Splunk after that?
Yeah, I spent a year working in Amazon, and then I decided that data is what I like, and it wasn't a theme at the time, but I liked resilience, and so I was like, yeah, sure, I'm gonna join Splunk and meet with some former coworkers out here.
Oh, nice. So now let's connect that back. Like, how do you connect that background to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean,
Or let me actually ask this way: were you hired to work on this project, or did you come to Splunk and you were working on something else, and then you were like, I want to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I joined Splunk just to join distributed search. I don't really think I had a scope in mind before I joined, and it was when I joined where I had the opportunity to pitch Federated Search for S3 because the engineering team was working on a very similar project. And so, yeah, then tying it back to my experience, yeah, I have a lot of cloud influence, and cloud is a big part of the strategy. Not obviously not all of it, but it's a big part of the strategy. So, I think that kind of influenced the proposals that we had from the product side in that time.
Wow. Okay, so you came in, you're working on distributed search, and then they were looking at something similar, and you were like, I want to be there.
Yeah, exactly. So the team was working on a feature about data model acceleration.
Ooh.
And the feature said, hey, you can write to Amazon S3 and read from Amazon S3. So then I was like, wait a second, you can read from Amazon S3? and they were like, yeah, we rewrote that entire thing too. We've been working on it for 3 years. And I was like, could we release that as well as a separate feature? Because DMA, it benefits from that. Like I could see some scenarios.
It's almost like they just wanted to sort of roll out this thing that is actually quite incredible, but they didn't realize how awesome it was.
Right, exactly. And I saw it and I was like, this seems huge. So we did the whole PM thing, other than just joining meetings, PMs also write documents. And so, so we wrote that whole PRFAQ press release explaining the future. People liked it and they said, okay, you maybe could do that. And so that's how we started working on it as a feature of Federated Search in that time.
Nice. So go ahead, Hal.
I'm thinking of so searching against data in an object store, an object store that's not local, it's over an API. That is not the type of feel and not the type of performance characteristics that you can do with your local Splunk index. So what does that mean for this feature and how folks will expect to use it and what they'll get out of it?
Yeah, no, and that's a very fair point, because when you present a database feature, right, the first thing that comes to mind is what is the cost and what is the performance, right? And so data in Amazon S3, as you mentioned, is data that's sitting raw, right? Nothing's touched it, nothing's processed it. Data that's sitting in Splunk has been indexed. There's very advanced artifacts the search engine uses to correctly parse it and do it as fast as possible. So when we introduced this feature, we didn't think of it as a feature where you would get a gain in performance, right? You don't use Fed Search for S3 to improve your performance. However, the main critical aspect is there's no data movement. So you didn't have to bring that data. And here's the part that I think a lot of times we kind of missed as engineers, and like, we're having these discussions, is that it's not trivial to move data, right? The amount of data that enterprises generate is measured in terabytes per day, right? That is already incredibly huge. And so when you ask someone to bring data in and then say, move a month worth of data, right? You're already looking at least 30 terabytes of data. Like that in alone is an operation that would strain any network, right? Any sort of like I think there's a famous like Google interview question that says, how would you like move around a big data problem? Like how would you move around 30 terabytes of data?
Oh wow, there's only one right answer, is you don't.
Well, one of the creative answers that you'll find online is, why don't you store it in a USB flash drive or like multiple and then ship it, because it'll be faster than like sending it through the wire, right? So
wow.
it's still a solution.
Yeah. So that you have to bake that in, and those expectations are different. So does that lead to people using it for different reasons? I mean, if the price and the performance are this, therefore,
yeah,
why is that important?
Like what I guess building on that question, I am so curious about what kind of use cases you thought it would be used for. Like high volume, low value, or like exploring data before bringing it in, or archiving. So there's that. But like also, we know that our customers tend to do things that we never anticipated that are just brilliant. And so I'm curious if there's, it hasn't been out for
Those
years.
are fun, yeah.
But yeah, like, has there been any surprises?
What are you learning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main thing is understanding that there are cases where you need to search data once, and the typical Splunk pipeline into ingesting into Splunk is optimizing for, it has an assumption, right, that optimizes for searching that data as many times as possible just because it might be beneficial. So I think that what we kept finding out is that there are times in which you generate data sets as a customer that they may be there, you may want to search it, but it's not something you're interested on a daily basis, right? I try to stay away from the terminology of the value of data, right? Because I think all data is valuable. But there are data sets that you need to read more often than others. And that's where we hit like the nail. Actually, I'm terrible at US idioms, so you're going to have to help me out on this.
No, just
nail in the head.
Yeah, no,
everything looks like a hammer if you have a nail. Sorry,
you got there. You got there.
You nailed
I appreciate
it.
That.
I nailed it.
Yeah. Don't worry, we wouldn't screw you. We're not a bunch of tools. Yeah. Nice.
Figuring out puns as I like migrated to the US was like mind blowing. I was like, wait, what? How are people using these phrases? Is this grammatically correct? I didn't see this in school.
Yeah, you don't want to come off like some kind of flathead.
You're still going. So
there's got to be one more there.
Oh, you think so?
I'm hoping.
I feel like at this point it should be someone else's torque.
I'm just
okay. Let's ratchet it back to what you were saying.
Yeah, for sure. So it was around like April of last year. We started like some sort of customer preview. Right, we had an MVP. We deployed it in a way that was
minimal viable product. Just I like to translate the acronyms.
Right, not most valuable player.
Yeah,
could be, but it's not this time.
Yeah,
right. And then during this customer experience, right, a couple of things came up that we weren't expecting. Like we ran surveys, we ran all sorts of research, right? But nothing beats giving someone a product and then watching them and then seeing what they do with it. And so people started saying, "Oh, like I sometimes have to go back in time, find evidence, and then like read a bunch of data just exactly once to fulfill this audit, to fulfill this investigation, etc. Especially it came from like one large retail company that I don't think we can mention here, but it's basically one of the things that happened to them is that they had a request from court to like get every single instance when a product on a retail website was searched for or at least accessed.
Oh my gosh.
Massive task, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And they had with Splunk, and they were using Splunk to track their web traffic. So the thing that they had to do was they had to make room in their ingestion pipeline, right? They have a ingestion is something that they budget for. Ingest bits of that historical data time by time, search it exactly once to see if the records were there, then delete it, and then bring in more data, right? It's a task
that is awful. Where was that data stored actually? Because it obviously wasn't in Splunk at that point.
You know, I don't have that detail, but it might have been a cloud object store, right? Because where else?
Kind of assume, yeah, okay.
Right. So yeah, they brought it in, searched it exactly once, deleted it. Like obviously they talked to Splunk to help out for that because it was a massive task. And then they heard about this feature and they said, we could have done this in a few hours. Whereas today, like when they had that instance, it took them somewhere about like a couple of weeks to a month. It involved like multiple engineering teams. It involved people from Splunk support, from Splunk professional services. So yeah, I think that's where we really like changed our entire mindset. And we said, wait a second, this is a real use case and this technology provides everything that this needs.
So what types of data do you find that customers will want to persist in S3 versus what maybe they do want this to operationally, be sent straight to Splunk and it will live in, TSIDX, those buckets?
Right. I think primarily logs. I think it's not I would position this as not a question of what type of data, but how recently it was generated. So, for example, data that is generated more recently is there's typically a need to access it more frequently. Like for example, my manager Bharat, he makes a really good analogy with photos on your phone, right? You took a couple photos last week. Chances are that you're gonna show them to people, that you're gonna see them yourself at some point, you're gonna share them, etc. Right? It's more likely that you're gonna consume those photos within a week, within a few days, than last year, right? Unless you're really, really nostalgic and you're like, oh, wait a second, let me go back to, where was I in the summer of 2021? Oh, it was lockdown, never mind, no photos then, that sort of deal. So, yeah.
Hal's just being distracting and showing off all the different art he's created for his background.
Yeah, I've got different photos, so I decided to lean into that.
Luis, you had me thinking about my pantry. Like I bring groceries in, they get put in the front, or like clothes. Like it's last in first out so often. But yeah, like the more recent the data, the more likely you need to view it, get value from it. You want to know a great way of framing that is like, I don't need to know the health of the platform a year ago, unless I'm comparing it like year over year. But like a year ago, it's past, it's done, it's over. But the health of the platform or like a security incident or whatever, like what it matters what's happening now or near to now. So those things, the need to use them diminishes over time. Also, I really admire your golden chalice that you keep drinking from. I'm sorry.
All right, let's distracted. See this.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. This is from the first Starbucks, which is up in Seattle. There was a clearance section, and it was probably the smallest cups that I could find.
Oh, what
That's
section?
how I ended up with it. Clearance. So.
Clearance. I thought you said clearance. A Karen section, and I was like, you mean like irritating people?
Well, I could see an intersection there.
Yeah, yeah.
But the clearance section carried these, and I was like, oh, I need Cortado cups. So
yes,
yeah, it is flashy though. I'm not gonna lie.
It is flashy.
Yeah.
So
okay, so the data, as it gets older, relevance become need for referencing it ages out, and as you were. Yeah.
But hold on a second.
Please.
So let's lean into that for a second. So the maybe the data life cycle. Right? You've got new data and it's hot, and we have these concepts in Splunk Index, right? Hot, warm, cold, archive. Those are the kind of the activity stages of buckets. So what was needed that was new here in the sense that we have to look at this object store. So I feel like there's something important about the object store. Why is the data in an object store as opposed to anywhere else?
Yeah, like if you were to compare it with a similar construct, like a deeply cold archive, right? Why can't that be in the deeply cold archive? And I think the assumption is still the same. If you have any cold storage, there is a process of thawing that has to be done on it because it's probably being heavily compressed, probably being stored in a format that is storage optimized. But the key thing is that there is a step before you have to search that data that you have to do, right? And it all comes down to convenience, right? Is it convenient for you to say, hey, engineers, could you please unfreeze this set of data so I can search it, right? And I think that's also true for Splunk archival solutions, right? There is a rehydration process that you need to do to bring it back into searchable. The question is it worth to go through all of those steps in order for you to just search that data once?
Oh yeah, it's like
right?
I put in like 3 hours of work just to spend a few seconds searching this and realizing I don't need it.
Right.
So how does this tie into other things? Can you use it anywhere that you would write a search and have it show up in your dashboards the same way? How do we literally would a customer use this feature?
Yeah, I think the main thing we see is time range searches. So you go into Splunk, you type in your search command, and you look at the time picker, and then go back in time in that time picker. What we will do is we'll translate that into search parameters that we will send back into Amazon S3 and then retrieve from that. It's at the end of the day, it's an SPL search. So you can plug it into a saved search. You can plug it into a dashboard, a report, visualization, for example,
anything with SPL.
A look file. Right, exactly. Anything with SPL, it's the vision, right? That it works just as any other search in SPL.
Do you have to write the search different, like to identify?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into. Is there different index? Do you have to refer to an index? Do you have different SPL commands?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. We're introducing it with one new command called SD select. Stands for structured data select. Just the name we use to identify data sets that sit at rest that you have created a schema for.
Okay.
And yeah, that's how you would identify it. And it goes against the federated index, which is a construct, right? It's unlike a typical Splunk index because this is not representing data that's been stored in Splunk.
Mm-hmm.
It represents data that sits somewhere else. And we use the word index to signify something more of a pointer, right? We're pointing to this data that sits away that you should treat as an index because you can read it from it, execute commands that are SPL-like for it and everything.
Okay. We've had some similar-ish concepts in the past where you could create a virtual index. It sounds something like that so I guess an administrator would go to where they configure indexes today and they would add a new type of index, and federated search for S3 would be a new type, something along those lines?
Right, precisely. We expose additional information like how would you think of the partition strategy for this? Partitioning is just a concept that's present in all databases, and it just means where do you divide your data physically? And then we ask you as a Splunk admin, like where in Amazon AWS it is, like what's the name of the account, what is the time field?
Yeah.
Right, etc.
So does the data in Amazon have to be structured in a certain way?
I was about to lean into that because he said that the search command is SD select, structured data select. And Splunk, you're not necessarily thinking about that structure. There's definitely cases like data models, for example, where you do, but a lot of times you're not. So how do we get from raw data mindset to what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, and I think in order for us to get into this, we need to clarify what we mean with structure, because it's a bit of a charged term, right?
We should structure our definition of structure.
We should.
To start with that, like the structure of the definition of structure is, no, just kidding. The way in which I've seen it being used in the data space is structure can either identify the data format, meaning that the data format is rigid, right? It won't take any different types of values. Like, for example, CSV, right? CSV at the very top has a line that says, these are all the possible columns. Anything else is an error. So that's a structured data format, right? But then you talk about structured data as from the perspective of, if I read it, should I expect to know the fields that I'm about to search? And this is what I think of when we say structured data in the command. For example, JSON as a data format, you could put whatever you want in there, right?
Oh yeah, I know JSON.
Array.
Yeah, JSON Conquer.
JSON Conquer. Yeah.
Good old friend, JSON.
Yeah.
You can put in whatever you want in JSON format, right? You can combine an array with objects inside of the array of objects, with arrays of objects inside of the arrays of objects, right? Like, you can do whatever you want with it. The key to it is that you can build a table that describes the schema of those JSON objects. So therefore, from a search perspective, you can search the data as structured data, even though JSON in itself does not enforce a strict structure.
Okay, so there's some data preparation, it sounds like, that's required before you can actually do the search.
Well, let me ask the question this way. I think some people, and I think this is what popped up in my and Hal's mind. Can I use this if I just have been dumping like logs into Amazon S3? Can I just point this at that and get going? Or are there requirements that the data had to arrive or be formatted or structured in a certain way before I, do I have to know in advance that I want to be applying this to that data, this type of search?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. There are no transformations you need to do on the data, right?
Woohoo!
Yes.
But I feel like there's a but coming.
Yeah, but you do need to create a structure view on it. I actually don't think it's too bad of a process.
Well, a view is a great word here. I mean, it's a view. You don't have to change the data. It's and we talked about you don't want to move the data because it's expensive to move the data computationally and network consumption wise.
But you have to create a way for Splunk to know what it is you're actually looking at.
Okay,
right? That's the view.
Right, exactly. The view in this case is a service that we leverage called AWS Glue for now. And what you have to do...
That's a long name, AWS Glue for now.
Yeah, and actually the full name is AWS Glue Data Catalog. And so when you refer to a table, it's AWS Glue Data Catalog table for now.
Okay. And we're considering moving off that because of our vegetarian alliance, right? We don't want the horses that are harmed in the glue.
So AWS Glue. So this sounds like something that the customer does need to understand. They do need to use that in order to set this up for the first time or something?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a one-time process. You create a table. And what's a table in this case is just a schema definition. You basically just go to Glue and tell Glue, these are all the possible columns, and this is the data format that you'd expect from these columns. And you say this bucket contains that data, and that's it. You plug that information into Splunk, and then you can start sending SD select queries out.
It kind of reminds me of like source types. Like, yeah, in Splunk you could just send stuff in blindly, and Splunk will take like a best effort on it. But once you define the source type, it's like all the different fields in it unlock and become so much more valuable than having to do that on the fly when you're writing the search. And so in this case, it sounds like you have to create a definition that will allow the stuff that is going to be searched to have any sort of meaning. But you can do that on the fly. You didn't.
And I have like 10 more questions related to this topic. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
So you've got this glue definition. Can you have multiple glue definitions against the same object or file in that object store?
Right. Yeah, you can have as many as your business needs require, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. It's like saying you have this data set, but you're only interested in a few fields for this use case. You're only interested in other fields for this use case. and so on. What glue will do is that if it'll only understand the data that was provided in the definition for the glue table. So if it finds anything outside of that, it'll just treat it as a blank field. So in other words, let's say you got a table, it has, say, item, date, and then a separate field for purchase. If you can create a glue that just says date and purchase or date and item on the same data, both are equally unintrusive operations because it's just a one-time like schema definition. And it's only until you run the search that on one of them you'll see purchase, on the other one you'll see item if you need to search for that data.
Can you permission those? Or working backwards, if you have, let's say that you got data and it's got lots of stuff in it that certain people may be allowed to see, but certain people may not allowed to see, right? So there's data privacy concerns, for example. I guess you could create like an open version of this that shows everything and another version that would not show all of that data. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good use case for it. And you can even leverage like a separate layer on that. Like a layer on top of that is the Splunk federated indexes, which behave like regular indexes in the sense that you can have roles assigned to them. So you can even take it one level deeper and then just have Splunk also do the filtering of that data. I mean, filtering as in the separation of who can view the data at the Splunk user level.
So roles can be, roles in Splunk Enterprise or Cloud could be used just like an index can to constrain who can read this data or not. Is that what
That's
we're
right?
saying?
But now it's an abstract on top of the data. So that means that you could do some more creative uses there. Very interesting.
Speaking of creative uses, did I forget if you answered this? I'm jumping all over the place. Did you have you found customers using this in ways that you hadn't expected?
Yeah, I think you know, one thing we need to clarify is that it's not GA yet, but you know, this is about to go into GA. And
by the time this podcast releases, I believe that it will be GA.
Okay, perfect. So
generally
yeah, I think
available.
So now we're talking in the past. So we've shifted the time frames in our brains. It has released
into the future.
That's the magic of broadcasting.
Yeah.
We're not broadcasting live. We could hit the live stream button.
No.
We could have prepared you better for that, to be fair.
So
what have you learned about customers that have been in the preview so far? How about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of learnings are that any customer could have this investigation requirement, going back in time. Some customers, this kind of blew my mind. Some customers are required to keep 7 years worth of data searchable.
Yeah.
Right. That's intense.
That's
a lot.
Yeah.
And then some other things we've learned.
But they don't have to touch it. They don't have to be searching it. They just have to have it.
It has to be there available.
So is this a very helpful use case for that? Because now you can store it in that cheap, S3 and yeah.
Oh, cheap. That's a good question. I didn't think about that. So there are multiple tiers of different ways that S3 can present that data to you. And there's I guess change those settings. Splunk wouldn't care, right? Because we're just referencing that bucket name.
Yeah, it doesn't care as long as it's all standard. So maybe it does care a little bit.
Okay. What's the alternative? What can't you do?
Yeah, Amazon S3 uses a tier called Glacier.
Mm-hmm.
And so Glacier, it's also heavily compressed. It's meant for data that you just need to keep in the back. And that data requires thawing. So we cannot search Glacier data at this moment.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Okay, so as long as you're in standard, you can still do that.
No one can search Glacier data out of the box. You have to thaw it, right?
Right.
Which
think
is
of it as
similar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a concept that a Splunk admin will understand right now because we do have the concept of freezing and thawing buckets for enterprise. And it's different in cloud. In cloud, you've got the I forget the exact name of the features. Dynamic data, one of the dynamic data features.
Active storage, active archive.
Archive, I think it's archive.
Yeah.
Right. Self-storage.
Self-storage,
Yes.
yeah.
Self-storage is where the customer maintains the keys to that S3 bucket. And Active Archive, this is coming back into my brain right now, live. Active Archive is the one where we maintain and control the data, but you get the button. You get to push the button
To
whether
bring
to bring some of that data back. So we should mention this is an enterprise cloud only feature. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And
is there?
it compatible with any S3 compatible object store?
I like that question.
Or is it only AWS?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's only
Thank
AWS
you.
for now.
Oh, okay.
For now.
For now.
For now.
Awesome.
As a PM, you can probably figure it out that I say for now for everything because I believe that anything can change. So
Yeah.
Yes, over an infinite amount of time. But as always, you should make your purchasing decisions based on things that are available now, as Splunk reserves the right to make whimsical decisions about its roadmap.
Right. Also,
But
this
when
is not financial
exactly?
advice.
What?
But when exactly
Yeah.
are you going to have that
What day?
next?
What time? Hal, I cut you off. I think you had another brilliant question.
I might have. I don't remember. I was going to ask earlier, though, going back to the data structure. Schema at read versus schema at write. That's something that we talk about when we are talking to customers, about the benefits of the platform. And you're making that decision when you bring that data in. You can say, and then, or rather, the data is the data, and you can make some decision. You can extract some fields at index time, or not. You can do that at search time, and that's where you're defining that schema at read. This feature sounds to me like you get some of the benefits of that in the sense that glue is a little bit of that feel. Like you can change that structure. Are there any caveats otherwise, though? So you can't change that at search time. You do have to have that glue table maintained appropriately. Any other caveats we need to understand about that structure?
Yeah, I think that's just it. As long as you can create a table on it, we can read it.
And that's a lightweight
table,
thing to do, right? That's not like a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's a one-time process, and then it's very rare for you to change your schema requirements afterwards. But we do allow editing the tables if needed.
Say that one more time. He says very rare to change the schema requirements because that's not what you expect people to do, or because they can't, or.
Well, if you think about it from a source type perspective, right? Each source type has its own schema, whether implicitly or explicitly, and the source type reflects data that's been generated with a certain purpose, right? So for the schema of it to change, the purpose must have changed of that source type. So therefore, imagine, for example, VPC flow data, right? It's just IP address times when you saw that IP address, outputs, ports, etc., right? Adding a new column to that, how could that possibly look like from a technology perspective, right?
I will answer that question. Yeah, the data format can change. I have a version 1 of this firewall software, and the log looks like this. The vendor makes a new feature, and that adds a new column to that log, and now it's version 2 of that same thing. I have the same use cases against that data, but now I could have more if I can extract that column and that field out.
I think another common one is if you think about web, like Apache logs, you in the httpd.conf, you can specify the output format of the log statements. If you were to change that, it's not a name value pair. So the like a CSV file, almost like that, like the order of the items may have changed, and now the fields that are coming out are different. And so those are actually opportunities where it might be best practice to create a new source type for that new format. So the old data format continues to be durable as it ages out, and this new one has all that rich new value in it too.
Right. There's definitely a dependency on the specification, right? I think you're right in that regard.
Can you version the glue tables? Can you see that version inside of Splunk?
You can not. You see the latest version in Splunk, but Glue can have multiple versions per table.
Interesting. Okay.
Very cool.
I think we can get there to because I feel like the data formats can change of the same data. There are cases that happen in the real world, I think. So now it's just okay, well, what's important for this, and how customers will use it. We'll see.
Right.
It'll be really interesting. What else have we missed? Anything else? Anything that we like? What should a customer do to get access to it, or what do they need to know going forward, or kind of like as we get final parts of the podcast, like what's the takeaway here?
Yeah, I think one other requirement we have discussed is we introduced a separate license for it.
Wait, this costs money?
I've seen that reaction a lot, but it makes a lot of sense. And actually, I think this is a great medium to cover it because if you think of an investigation, right? Let's go back to the use case. An investigation today can be a very disruptive operation on your day-to-day usage. Like think of your typical Splunk search hit. There's daily usage going in. We see customers with thousands of searches per day. But then an investigation can happen, like the need for an investigation can occur. And then if you were to not use this feature, you'd have to do the task we talked about, which is ingest the data, search it once, ingest the data again, search it once. One side effect of that is it will affect all other users because now you're taking up some capacity, like kind of a large scale, because it's also historical data, right? So it's large in volume. You're taking up some capacity that your other users might be kind of, needing. And so they might be upset about it, right? They might, finish all the coffee in the break room. It's revenge for you doing that, etc. And so when used Federated Search for S3, we thought about that once we realized that there is a need for not interrupting the operations in the case of an investigation. And so we are hosting a separate search service that is taking care of all of the queries and that is taking care of all of the data processing that comes with that. So since we're no longer using the infrastructure that you acquired as a customer for your Splunk stack, we're technically not using SVCs, right? Because SVCs account for hardware representations in a virtual way. And so that usage goes now to a separate service. And for that, we decided to introduce a new license that is called Data Scan Units. And that just governs how you search data at rest on a yearly basis, because investigations can also happen at any time during a year.
Data scan.
So
yeah.
Okay. So you're going to enroll in this service and you're going to pay for data scan units up front. Is that how that works? Like a certain number of them?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
How many scans usually come in like one unit of purchase?
Yeah, so every unit represents 10 terabytes of data. So those 10 terabytes of data you could have scanned in like 1,000 searches or one search is your choice as a customer.
Okay, gotcha. So I guess you'd issue a search, and maybe I guess you can probably permission this whole thing, right? You can make it so that you can control who has access to use those data scan units, basically.
Right, by the means of the federated indexes, role-based access control. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And then searches can be issued, and then we'll count those up for you and show you how you're using it. And then, okay, all right, makes sense. What happens when you hit the limit? Does it stop working?
Yeah,
like the search will fail, or
like enforcement.
Yeah, there's no enforcement, right? And I think this is one of the things that we were very intentional about. If you are in the middle of an investigation, time is of the essence, right? And so it would really suck to like come to the limit of your license, and then like a window would pop up and say, call Splunk to acquire more data scan units, right? Like, so we wanted to avoid all of that. And so we allowed to go over the capacity. And another cool thing about it is that it's not going to present any performance degradation, right? It's not like, coming up with analogies here, but it's not like your car's like, gasoline intake, right? Where if it's like closer to the bottom, it doesn't operate as efficiently as if it was full of gas.
Oh, right.
Bit of a stretch, but still.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but yeah.
Like mobile data plans where like you go over and then they start throttling you. So you're saying in this, it just continues, performance and everything continues, but you probably, I'm guessing, have a conversation.
But you're not using your Splunk Cloud indexers heavily when that's, because it's the AWS service that is doing a lot of that work.
It's a Splunk search engine that is doing a lot of that work. That we host as a separate service. it's not the search head, right? We also don't leverage the indexers for this.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I see architecturally why that would be, because it's not the one that's okay. So we're basically, the search is getting dispatched, if you will, over to AWS, and that
Glue.
returns some subset of the data through that glue view, and then the search head is doing the marshaling of that. And I guess you could still, manipulate that before it's even reached to the end user, right? Because it's SPL. So whatever you want to do in that SPL command afterwards, after the SD select, you can still do that, right? I can do my evals and whatever.
Right, exactly. I typically
Okay.
demo eval, time chart, output lookup, input lookup, summary index, and all of that.
So wait a second. Knowing that this would take time, and then it'll consume as the data scan units. What if I want to explore that data and kind of like persist that data? How would I do that?
Yeah, you could write to an output lookup file. You could write into a summary index.
Okay.
We're working on features in the future where we will automatically optimize if you're sending like the same search over, like maybe accidentally, or maybe you're exploring it in a different way. We will optimize how that translates to data scan units utilization. So we're on your side, customer. We'll try to make this as friendly and as easy to use as possible.
That's pretty interesting. The summary indexing, you got my mind going. Like, okay, I'm doing an investigation. I got to find every time the product is looked for or whatever. I don't need all the raw data that I just searched through. I just want any time that product was found. But now I'm going to do a lot of searching. I got to investigate, the IPs that searched, and if they jumped, and where else they went. And so maybe I would stash the results of that scan into a summary index. So then I could do more repeated investigations on it where I do need that more Splunk-like performance.
Right. Or for a dashboard, for example, right? Every time you load a dashboard that contains the same data.
Interesting. So what's the primary variable if you want to run this, for your experimentation purposes while you're debugging that SPL, right? Would it basically be the time picker? I mean, or can you do, for example, what is the one that lets you filter the number of events that are searched?
The
head limit. Yeah, there's sampling is another one, right? So how would some of those multiple ways in the time picker affect the cost of that search that's running? Would it work as I would expect it to based on my knowledge of SPL?
Yeah, so the time picker would effectively limit the amount of data that you will scan if you're using partitioning, right? This is a
didn't
pretty
talk about that.
thing.
We actually do need to talk about that, don't we?
Yeah, I think
how much time we got? So partitioning, it can be other than the date is what I'm hearing you say behind the scenes there.
So the main partitioning strategy is date, right? And so that's where it was relevant to that comment before, where since it's partitioned by date, you only read as many partitions as you need to specified by your time picker.
Right.
Okay.
There can be other partitioning keys. For example, AWS CloudTrail uses almost 5 keys to partition data. That's AWS account that generated the traffic, that's AWS region, and then a combination of year, month, and day. So you could use all of that to filter your scan, and that'll make it a lot more efficient.
This is parallel to like source type, host, index in the traditional world.
Because right, it's like indexed fields, kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Interesting.
Right.
All right. So can the partitions change on that? I guess the customer makes that decision when they're putting the data in S3.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, like when customers think about partitioning, it sounds like this very advanced topic that requires you to really plan through and everything. The reality is that whatever source type you're reading, it probably already has partitions defined for it, right? CloudTrail will divide it automatically into these partitions that I talked about. VPC Flow does the same. Okta access logs also have a folder structure. At the end of the day, partitioning is just a folder structure that the data is divided in.
Yeah,
and that's what we use.
Okay. So then Basically, I would want to know that folder structure, that partitioning of the particular source type, and that will kind of help me write efficient searches against that data.
Right, that's correct. And there is a bit of a task to know that partitioning structure in advance. But
Do we
once you
expose
do,
that, as hints inside of the Splunk UI?
we could. At this moment, we don't, just because it's something that we're still evaluating the need for. But yeah, there's definitely ways we could do things we could do about it.
Cool. As we're coming to the end of our time together, like anything else that we didn't get to touch on, or maybe we jumped to a different topic that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think the hot cold data is something that it's a paradigm, right? And it's something that I kind of wanted to chat about because it's a little nerdy. I think it's something that it's a pattern that we see just in the nature of data itself, right? And it's something that I've definitely seen in my past life back at Microsoft, where customers would often choose partition keys for distributed databases, right? Sharded databases. And so typically the partition that would see the most activity was the latest partition. And that was true for almost all customers that were using partition key as the time field as a partition key. So I kind of want to think that it's something about the universe that makes like most recent data a lot more interesting to the universe itself, like humans. And then historical data is more of a need as needed access and things like that. So I think that the moment we've seen customers like adopt this mindset that think about your data from a tiering perspective, from a recency perspective, that's when they can most effectively apply not only fetch search for S3, but archival strategies, hot, cold, warm tiers of storage, and so on. I think that represents a more advanced way to manage your data and therefore serve your needs as you're trying to read that data.
So I think we are about on time. We're
I have
about
one
to run
last
up against
question.
time. All right, you get to close us out.
The shirt, you came to the right trace. I definitely missed when that came out. Is that relatively new?
I
I
don't have
got
that
it
one
from
either.
this Splunk employee store back in 2021. So maybe it's part of the 2021 fall collection.
Oh, the fall collection. Oh.
We're gonna have to refer people to the Splunk history. Oh shoot, and I can't remember the name of the website right now, of course, because I need it right now, but maybe I'll come up with it.
Oh, yes. I think I know what you're talking about, but we can bring that up in our next recording because this one needs to
Yes,
wrap up.
this one needs to wrap up.
Luis, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
We had a great time learning from you and really excited to play with this.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
The Splunk Gallery.
Yes.
We're gonna have we'll talk to him maybe on a future podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Luis. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and happy splunking.